"I don't want a nation of thinkers. I want a nation of workers." These were the words of John D. Rockefeller, an oil tycoon and businessman credited with the Cleveland Massacre, a vicious corporate event in which he gobbled up a total of 22 rival oil businesses in Cleveland, Ohio, and expanded his own company, Stanford Oil. Rockefeller was a ruthless monopolist who would later control 90% of the oil industry in America, becoming the country's very first billionaire in the process. However, who was John D. Rockefeller, and how did he go from being a nobody to becoming America's most successful oil magnate and first publicly confirmed billionaire? This is the tale of John D. Rockefeller, America's most notorious monopolist. Chapter 1. Early life. John Davidson Rockefeller was born in Richford, New York, a small town upstate near Syracuse, on July 8, 1839. He had 4 younger siblings and 1 older sister. William Anderson Rockefeller, his father, was a con artist who called himself a traveling botanic physician. Rockefeller's father lived a vagabond's life as a deaf-mute peddler hawking potions with alleged secret cures, nicknamed Devil Bill because of his adeptness at persuasion. He was known for many fraudulent practices and was the kind of charming con artist who could sell people their dreams and have them pleading with him to take their money. He led a double life, posing as a Dr. William Livingston, an eye and ear specialist, and raising a second family with a woman named Nancy. It turns out that Devil Bill would defraud not only the general public, but also his own family. He once bragged, "I cheat my boys every chance I get. I want to make them sharp." Devil Bill would always teach his kids not to trust anyone. As a way to teach this lesson, when John was just a toddler, Devil Bill would open his arms to catch him, but when the little boy jumped, he would step back and let him fall on the floor. What a great way to raise kids. But that wasn't all. In order to deceive John and his siblings into performing extra duties, he would make promises he never planned to keep. These actions served their purpose efficiently as Rockefeller would grow up to be wary of others. Early on, John would assist his mother in raising turkeys in their backyard and working odd jobs to help make ends meet because his father never showed up and always seemed to have no money. This was of course because he kept 2 families. Devil Bill would later come clean to his family about his other marriage and would somehow convince Rockefeller's mum, Eliza, and his other wife, Nancy, to live together with him as one family. Eliza Davidson, Rockefeller's mother, was very different from his father. She was a homemaker, very thrifty, and a devout Baptist who also lived a frugal, religious lifestyle. From an early age, she made sure to teach Rockefeller how to be thrifty and efficient, to let nothing go to waste, and to make use of everything he had. This would be very important in Rockefeller's success in the future. The family would later relocate to Cleveland, Ohio, and on September 25, 1855, at the age of 16, Rockefeller would begin his first job as a bookkeeper for Hewitt and Tuttle, a commission merchant firm where he learned to calculate transportation expenses. Much of his work involved negotiating with barge canal owners, ship captains, and freight agencies. During these negotiations, Rockefeller discovered that transportation charges that people thought were set could be negotiated down through good timing and favorable treatment from shippers. This lesson would also come in handy later in his career. By age 20, Rockefeller would leave bookkeeping to open a business in produce commissions. He and his partner, Morris B. Clark, raised $4,000 as capital for the business, and by 1859, the business was booming and making great profits. But as you probably already guessed, the Civil War was around the corner, and although it spelt doom for many, Rockefeller, being a master at his craft, turned this disaster into profit, as he soon learned that as a result of the mobilization, Union troops needed tons of food, and what better way to make money than to bank on thousands of hungry soldiers? His produce commission business soared. Now, Rockefeller was a devout abolitionist and felt strongly about the Civil War. However, he believed that his presence was needed more in business than on the battlefield. During the mobilization, he paid substitute soldiers to take his place on the battlefield. He later said, "I wanted to go into the army and do my part, but it was simply out of the question. There was no one to take my place. We were in a new business, and if I had not stayed, it would have stopped, and with so many dependent on it." Chapter 2. Entering the oil business. In 1849, a man named Samuel Keir found crude oil on his property in Titusville, Pennsylvania. By the 1850s and 1860s, the news had spread, leading to a massive boom that would come to be known as the Pennsylvania Oil Rush. Lots of men were relocating to Pennsylvania with the expectation of striking it rich by drilling for oil there. At that time, people only needed oil for their lamps to see at night. To get oil, the only other option was to refine it from whale fat, which was a far more arduous arduous process than simply extracting crude oil from the earth. The problem, however, was that crude oil in its raw form couldn't be used and so had to be refined before it could be utilized by customers. This resulted in high demand for the few available refineries. Another point to note was that the oil industry at the time of the rush was very wasteful, not just while drilling but also at the refinery level. At the time, the refining process could turn at most 60% of the oil into kerosene, while the remaining 40% ended up as an unstable, flammable substance. Most of the refineries would keep the 60% and then dump the remaining 40% into the river. Rockefeller, who had been raised by his mother to be very thrifty and to avoid wastage at all costs, saw an opportunity here. In 1863, at age 24, he would invest in a Cleveland refinery and become a part of the growing oil sector. However, as opposed to dumping the rest of the oil that was not good as kerosene, he used the 40% as gasoline to fuel his own refinery, thereby dropping his production costs significantly. He would also buy acres of land, plant trees, and then make his own oil barrels out of them rather than buying from other merchants. As the demand for gasoline increased, Rockefeller's fortune expanded. As his mother had taught him, he would always find a way to put the leftovers from his refinery to good use by transforming them into products like lubricating oil, petroleum jelly, tar, and paraffin wax. With oil selling for $13 per barrel at the time, Rockefeller's refinery was able to reduce its production costs to just 96 cents per barrel, generating a profit margin of 12. Chapter 3. Becoming a monopolist. It was in 1870 when Rockefeller, along with his brother, William Henry Flagler, and other investors, established the Standard Oil Company of Ohio. However, the company's rise in power and wealth was not only a result of Rockefeller's thrifty business strategy. Rockefeller was a hardcore monopolist who believed in completely crushing his competition. He showed no mercy when it came to this and was as ruthless as could be. He had various tactics up his sleeve and would usually sell his oil at lower prices to bankrupt rival businesses. He would then swoop down and buy off the business when they were finally on auction. His strategies included forming clandestine relationships with railroad corporations to secure favorable pricing for his oil shipments and restrict the number of shipments accessible to his rivals. To further cripple his rival, he would also buy up all the available refinery equipment on sale, sometimes going so far as to acquire the equipment supplier companies themselves and then refusing to sell replacement parts to his rivals. Soon, the firm was refining 90% of the oil consumed in the United States. The company had grown too large for a single person to manage, so Rockefeller established a board of trustees consisting of the owners of the businesses his company had integrated, with himself as the head. This move placed the administration of the company in the hands of the most experienced people in the oil business and set the precedent for the trust administration style which is common in modern businesses. Rockefeller would later try to get in on the railroad business because the railroad and oil industries were now the biggest industries in America. At this point, everyone could see that if Rockefeller wasn't stopped, he would keep on taking over companies and there would be no stopping him from taking more and more until there was nothing left for anyone else. The general public now began to view Rockefeller as a dangerous shark gobbling up small businesses. After all, it had already happened in the oil industry, and he was now making moves in the railroad industry. People were terrified that he would eventually become so rich and powerful he just might take over the world. In 1911, after several suits, the US Supreme Court ruled that Standard Oil be dismantled as it violated federal antitrust laws. The company was then broken up into 34 subsidiaries. This includes companies that would become ExxonMobil, Conoco, and Chevron. This, however, turned out to be good for Rockefeller, who still held most of Standard Oil's stock after his retirement. The individual subsidiaries were worth more than the whole, and as shares of these subsidiaries grew in value, Rockefeller finally became the country's first billionaire with a fortune worth nearly 2% of the entire American economy. Chapter 4. Motivations and Life Philosophy. Rockefeller had always been disgusted by his father's ways and had sworn to himself to never end up like him. As a young man, he declared that his two goals in life were to make $100,000, which is the equivalent of $3 million today, and to live up to 100 years old. He also adopted a strict, religious and frugal lifestyle, giving a portion of his income to charity as tithe since he was 16 years old. He valued honest work above all other things and always celebrated his job day on the 25th of every September to commemorate getting his his first job. It is believed that he donated more than $500 million to various philanthropic causes, including educational, religious, and scientific causes. He also created the Rockefeller Foundation, which had the ambitious goal of promoting the well-being of mankind throughout the globe. The foundation contributed to achievements such as the development of a yellow fever vaccine and the successful eradication of hookworm disease in the United States. There's a saying that goes, "There are no good or bad people, but just people who do good and bad things." And so, although Rockefeller had his bad parts and was hated by many, they were all equally balanced out by his acts of philanthropy. At the end of the day, he gave back to society, maybe not quite as much as he took, but significantly enough to make a difference. The road to success is a bumpy part that many have sworn to follow. If you're interested in more stories about the history of business legends, check out the other videos on our channel.